Welcome, everyone, especially to you, our listeners strong in the Catholic faith. Today we're doing something a bit different, a really deep dive.
That's right. We're exploring Purgatory, but through a very specific, kind of unusual lens.
Yeah, we have this remarkable document. It's an unpublished manuscript from 1967, actually, called Purgatory2.pdf.
And it claims to be, well, a record of conversations, intimate first-hand accounts, supposedly.
Between a nun, Sister MDLC, and the soul of another nun, Sister MG, who had passed away.
A soul believed to be, in purgatory, undergoing purification.
Now, where this manuscript came from is interesting, too. The Reparation Society of the Immaculate Heart of Mary published it, and they were very careful adding important caveats based on church guidance, the decrees from Pope Urban VIII.
Absolutely crucial point. They presented it purely as a historical document based on human testimony.
Right. Not as something the church has definitively ruled on regarding these specific claims. It's a distinction we really need to hold on to as we go through this.
Definitely. The intro to the manuscript itself really emphasizes that. It calls it a pious account of reported talks.
And it apparently got passed along to a bulletin, Notre Dame de la Bonne Mort, by a missionary, suggests a desire to share it for maybe spiritual reflection.
Which, isn't totally out of the blue in Catholic tradition. These kinds of reported encounters, while not everyday things, they do pop up.
Especially in the lives of saints, right? The manuscript actually brings this up.
It does. It gives the example of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, a really fascinating one.
Tell us about that.
Well, the manuscript recounts her interaction with the soul of a Benedictine monk. He'd actually been her confessor.
Wow, okay.
And he appeared to her, apparently in great suffering, asking for her prayers and penances to help him through purgatory.
And did it say why he was suffering so much?
It did. According to St. Margaret Mary's account, he admitted certain failings, things like prioritizing his own interests, being too concerned about his reputation, a lack of charity, and, well, attachment to worldly things. Creature comforts, you might say.
That's quite a sobering list. A real reminder for all of us, maybe especially those in religious life.
Indeed. And the story goes that St. Margaret Mary, with her superiors spent 3 months offering prayers and intense penances for him.
3 months?
Yeah. The manuscript mentions the suffering she reportedly felt sort of in union with his.
And the outcome.
Eventually, the soul appeared again, but this time filled with joy, thanking her as he entered heaven. It really highlights the power we have through prayer and sacrifice to help the holy souls.
That's a beautiful illustration of the communion of saints in action. And the manuscript mentions other examples, too.
Just briefly, it names Canon Ribet's Divine Mysticism and Bisquio Palafox y Mendoza's work, Light for the Living Through the Experience of the Dead.
Again, just as examples of similar reported accounts.
Exactly. Always with that caveat, resting on human authority, not divine revelation. But it shows these kinds of stories have a history within the church's experience.
So the thinking is maybe God allows these things sometimes.
The manuscript seems to suggest that. Yeah, for a few reasons, maybe. One, to bring comfort to the suffering souls by prompting our prayers.
Makes sense.
And two, to instruct us, the living, to show us the seriousness of even, smaller faults in the eyes of God's justice. That title, Light for the Living, kind of captures it.
Right. Okay, let's get back to our specific manuscript. The main figures, Sister MDLC. What do we know about her?
She's described as, well, exceptionally virtuous, known for having really sound judgment, a keen mind.
And crucially, the manuscript says she wasn't inclined towards seeking out extraordinary things, like visions or mystical experiences.
Exactly. Inherently skeptical, perhaps. Which you could argue lends a certain credibility to the account. It wasn't someone, predisposed to this.
People who knew her apparently thought very highly of her, held her in saintly regard, even her students.
That's what the testimonies suggest.
Yeah.
And the fact that she herself had doubts, reportedly, about what was happening. Well, it suggests it wasn't just imagination running wild.
Okay, and then there's the other figure, Sister MG, the deceased nun.
Yes. The interactions apparently started back in November 1873. Just unexplained sighs at first.
Sighs. That sounds unsettling.
You'd imagine so. They apparently grew louder, closer to Sister MDLC over time.
How did she react?
With prayer, naturally. Lots of prayer, frequent communion, stations of the cross, rosaries. The standard spiritual toolkit, really.
But the sighs continued.
For several months, yes. Until February 15th, 1874. That's when the voice supposedly identified itself.
As Sister MG.
as Sister MG, a nun from the same community who had died a few years earlier, quite young, only 36, described as a victim of her devotion and duty.
Hmm. And there was a connection between them when Sister MG was alive.
There was. Apparently, Sister MDLC had often given advice to Sister MG, advice that Sister MG hadn't always taken.
Oh, interesting. So now, from Purgatory, she's seeking help from the very person whose advice she ignored.
That's the narrative presented. It's quite humbling, isn't it? Shows how things look different from the perspective of eternity.
It certainly does. And the manuscript suggests this was God's plan, that Sister MDLC would help her.
That seems to be the implication, that through Sister MDLC's holiness, she was meant to help purify and eventually release Sister MG. It's a powerful image of the communion of saints again.
Our actions here affecting souls there.
Tangibly.
Mm.
But Sister MDLC wasn't exactly eager, was she?
No, the manuscript says her first reaction was fear. She wanted Sister MG to just leave and never come back.
Understandable, perhaps.
But she was apparently told she just had to endure it for as long as God allowed. And this connection lasted for years.
Many years. Sister MDLC reportedly documented these events herself from 1874 all the way up to 1890.
Wow. Okay, so this brings us to the core of our deep dive today.
Exactly. For you, our listeners, fellow Catholics, we want to explore the insights this manuscript offers about purgatory, about the spiritual life.
But we need to repeat that caveat, echoing the Church's own prudence. We're presenting this as a historical account, human authority.
We're not endorsing the supernatural claims themselves. The focus is on the spiritual lessons, the reflections on faith. What understanding of purgatory emerges from this specific text?
Precisely. Mining those nuggets that might deepen our own faith journey, our understanding of God's justice, His mercy.
So let's get into the substance. What did Sister MG allegedly say?
Well, one major theme, obviously, is the suffering in purgatory. Its reality, its nature.
She describes intense pain, yes.
Yeah.
And even seems to differentiate stages. There's a first purgatory described as involving great suffering.
Okay.
And then a second purgatory. Still painful, she says, but not nearly as much as the first one.
Interesting. Are there more stages?
Later on, she mentioned something called a purgatory of desire, which sounds different.
Purgatory of desire. What does that mean?
The torment there isn't fire, apparently, but this intense, painful longing to see God, to be united with Him.
That's profound. And who experiences that?
It seems to be suggested for souls who maybe didn't cultivate a really strong desire for God, a deep longing for heaven while they were alive.
So the quality of our desire for God now could shape our purification later.
That seems to be the implication. It really makes you stop and think about your own heart's desire, doesn't it? How intensely are we longing for God right now?
It does. A key takeaway, perhaps. Even in the less intense stages, though, the suffering is still significant.
Oh, yes. Especially the separation from God. She calls it a continuous martyrdom, even worse than any physical fire. Which makes sense, theologically. God is our ultimate happiness.
And throughout these conversations, there's a strong emphasis on praying for the soul, sir.
Absolutely. A constant, heartfelt plea. Sister MG herself keeps asking Sister MDLC for prayers.
Does she specify which prayers are most helpful?
She does. The holy sacrifice of the Mass is mentioned as the most powerful thing, unequivocally.
The Mass, of course.
And then she says, next to the Mass, the way of the cross is the best prayer. The rosary also comes up frequently. She asks for rosaries to be said for her.
These are cornerstones of Catholic devotion. It's reaffirming to hear them highlighted like this.
It really reinforces that belief in the communion of saints. Our prayers here genuinely help those undergoing purification. It's not just a nice idea. It's presented as having real effect.
It's empowering, really, knowing we can participate in their journey towards heaven.
And the manuscript also sheds light on the role of Our Lady, St. Michael, St. Joseph.
How are they involved, according to Sister MG?
Well, she mentions seeing the Blessed Virgin Mary, but only after entering the second purgatory, not in the first, most intense stage.
Okay. And her presence
is a huge source of comfort and encouragement. It lessens their suffering, and Mary speaks to them about heaven, apparently.
That image of Mary visiting the souls, especially on her feast days, it's a very traditional and comforting belief, isn't it? Her maternal care reaching even there.
It is. And St. Michael the Archangel also has a specific job.
Which is?
He's the one who comes to escort the souls to heaven once their purification is complete. A glorious moment.
Leading them home.
Exactly. His own feast day is apparently marked by his visit to purgatory and the release of many souls, especially those devoted to him on earth.
What about St. Joseph?
He's mentioned too, seen by the souls. It suggests the whole heavenly court is involved, aware, supporting them.
That's a beautiful picture. Now, the manuscript also touches on something a bit more sobering regarding religious life.
Yes, Sister MG states pretty clearly that the purgatory for religious nuns and priests is often much longer and more rigorous than for people living in the world.
Longer and more rigorous. Why?
Because, she says, they've received more graces through their vocation, and they'll be held accountable for any abuse of special graces.
That's a heavy thought. Greater gifts mean greater responsibility.
Precisely. A serious reminder about fidelity to one's calling. She even mentions, sadly, that many nuns are sort of abandoned in purgatory because people forget to pray specifically for them.
Underscoring the need for prayer within religious communities for their deceased members.
Definitely. Another recurring theme is the absolute importance of living in God's presence. Constantly.
And pure intention.
Yes, striving for pure intentions in everything. Sister MG urges Sister MDLC to make it a practice. She suggests God is seeking souls who love him purely for himself, not for what they can get.
Which she says is rare.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
It really pushes us towards self-examination, doesn't it? Why am I really doing this? Is it truly out of love for God?
It's that lifelong refining process, aligning our motives with his will.
And connected to that is mortification, self-denial.
What kind does she emphasize?
Both kinds, corporal and spiritual. But she puts a special emphasis on spiritual mortification, controlling the mind, the eyes, the tongue.
Inner discipline.
Right. And doing these things with pure intention is apparently far more pleasing to God than, say, physical penance is done just out of self-will. It's about conquering that self-will.
Tackling pride and selfishness at the root, that interior battle.
Exactly. Making reparation inwardly. But there's encouragement, too. Sister MG apparently says that even small acts, tiny sacrifices, if done with pure intention and offered for the souls, can bring immense relief.
More than vocal prayers sometimes.
She says, one single action of yours, done with purity of intention, when you are closely united to Jesus, relieves me more than many vocal prayers.
That's incredibly heartening. It means our ordinary daily lives have huge potential value.
When offered with love, yes. Those hidden acts, the love poured into mundane tasks. It's not just about big gestures.
It's about the constant orientation of the heart. Beautiful. What else? Vigilance.
Yes, a strong call to spiritual vigilance. Guarding against lukewarmness, indifference towards God.
That's just enough attitude.
Exactly. She stresses responding generously to God's graces, not letting them slip away. Guarding our interior life, avoiding distractions. Very relevant for us today.
For sure. It's easy to get complacent, let the world crowd God out. This is a real wake-up call to be intentional about our spiritual life, nurturing that love for Jesus.
And the manuscript paints a stark contrast between heaven and purgatory. Heaven is pure delight. Purgatory is profound darkness. Even when souls in purgatory get glimpses of heaven, it almost increases their suffering.
Because it intensifies their longing.
Precisely. The longing for that full union, the beatific vision, it makes the temporary separation even more painful.
Which should fuel our desire for heaven even more.
It should. And Sister MG specifically recommends offering up our daily actions, joys, sorrows, work, everything for the relief of the holy souls.
A simple, practical way to live out that solidarity.
It integrates faith into daily life, turning ordinary things into acts of love for the departed.
It's a constant opportunity, and underlying all this is God's justice and mercy.
Yes, they're intertwined. The suffering is just, a consequence of sin and imperfection. But purgatory itself is merciful, a purification necessary for heaven.
And the souls there are completely dependent.
Utterly dependent on God's will, his grace, and importantly on our prayers. They can't help themselves.
So wrapping this up, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, first, it strongly reaffirms the reality of purgatory and the suffering involved, even its different forms like that purgatory of desire.
And the power of our prayers.
Absolutely, especially the Mass, the Way of the Cross, the Rosary. Their effectiveness is really stressed, and the comforting presence of Mary, St. Michael, St. Joseph.
And that specific call to religious about fidelity and the potential for a longer purification if graces are abused.
Yes. But universally, it calls all of us to live consciously in God's presence, strive for pure intentions, practice mortification, especially inwardly, and cultivate a deep personal love for Jesus.
Remembering that even small acts offered with love matter immensely for the holy souls.
And the need for vigilance against lukewarmness. Don't get complacent. Keep striving for holiness. Avoid distractions.
That contrast between heaven's joy and purgatory's longing should really motivate us.
Definitely. And the practical tip, offer up your day for the holy souls. It's simple, powerful charity.
So the overall message seems to be, serve God faithfully, pray for the departed, and strive constantly for deeper union with him right now.
Exactly. So perhaps a final thought for everyone listening, drawing from all this. Considering what Sister MG allegedly shared, how can we, maybe starting today, more intentionally direct our prayers, our small sacrifices, our daily actions towards helping the holy souls?
And tied to that, what parts of our own lives might need, a deeper look in light of that call to pure intention and unwavering love for Jesus that comes through so strongly?
Deep questions, certainly worth pondering in prayer.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it provides food for thought and prayer. Continue exploring these mysteries within the richness of our Catholic faith. Until next time, God bless you.